UK house prices are currently at an all-time high. According to data from Her Majesty's Land Registry, now that's the department of the UK government responsible for registering ownership of land and property in England and Wales, the average price of a house in the UK is currently £270,000. 10 years ago, in January 2012, it was £166,000, a massive increase. As a result, we've seen a very sudden increase in inquiries from clients with buy-to-let properties asking whether now is the time to sell, lock in those gains and move their profits to a different type of investment. Now, I'm sure you can guess what I'm going to say. The answer to that question will depend entirely on the individual investor's personal circumstances and objectives, and they should take independent financial advice. However, it might be useful for us to consider some of the pros and cons. There are a number of reasons why some investors like buy-to-let investment. One of these is that property is tangible. You can see it, you can touch it, you can give it a good kick. It's not going anywhere. Unless it burns down or gets flattened by a tree in a storm, you're always going to own that asset. And even if a disaster like that does happen, you should be insured. So it's that ownership of physical property that gives some investors a nice feeling of security. Another benefit of property investing is that it provides a combination of investment growth and income. Now, you might be tempted to sell a property because of all these headlines about house prices, but you have to bear in mind that your rental income will also stop. On the negative side, lack of liquidity is a major drawback of property investment. So it's fine all the time, you're happy to leave the capital tied up in the investment, but when you need access to some money, it gets complicated. If you're invested in shares or bonds or money market instruments, etc., you can usually sell these easily and quickly see cleared funds in your account. When you're invested in property, you typically put up a sign in the front garden, put some photos on the internet and wait for someone to make you an offer. Now, at the moment, the market is moving very quickly, but that's not always the case. And even if you find a buyer straight away, you still have to leave time for every buyer and seller in the chain to arrange valuations and structural surveys, complete conveyancing, arrange mortgages, sort out removal services, etc. It's not a quick process. Property investment also suffers from being quite inefficient tax-wise. So stamp duty is a big one. You can pay thousands in tax just to buy the property in the first place. You can't hold property in an ISA. It's not tax efficient to hold residential property in a pension, so you miss out on all those potential benefits. Also, the rules around tax relief on mortgage interest have changed in recent years. So that means even higher rate and additional rate taxpayers only get a 20% tax credit where they used to be able to claim 40% or 45% relief. And then there's the big one, which is capital gains tax. If you dispose of a property asset, you kind of have to sell the whole thing in one go. If you've got a portfolio of shares or unit trusts, for example, you can choose to sell a percentage of your holding in any given tax year to maximise tax efficiency. If you're selling a property, you can't just auction off the back bedroom or the downstairs loo, you have to sell the whole thing. This means all of that lovely investment growth gets taxed in one go. Now, the good news is you do have an annual exemption. The first £12,300 of profit you make in a tax year is tax-free. And if you own the property jointly, each investor gets their own allowance. Bear in mind, that's per person and not per asset. So if you sell more than one property or a property and some shares in the same year, it all gets lumped together. And the exemption only applies in the year you sell the asset, not for each year you held it. Now, although capital gains on property is taxed at different rates to income, it's effectively added on top of your income to determine the rate of tax you pay. So for some people, this can have the effect of moving them up a bracket. Maybe you're a basic rate taxpayer in respect of your earnings, but you become a higher rate capital gains taxpayer on some or all of those property gains. One complaint I hear from property investors over and over again is that it's quite hard work. Other types of investment don't require you to fix leaky taps or replace broken down boilers or evict problem tenants or redecorate. Now, of course, you can pay someone to manage the tenancy and do all of that for you, but the cost of that reduces your return. Or you can do it yourself, maybe not replacing the boiler, but the decorating and the leaky taps you might want to do yourself. But then it starts to become less of an investment and more of a job. The final thing I'm going to talk about is diversification. Now, I know I talk about this all the time. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't back only one horse. But there's a reason for that. Spreading your money around is probably the single most important thing you can do to mitigate investment risk. Now, if you own buy-to-let property as part of a larger, more diversified portfolio, you might be doing okay. But if you tie all your money up in property, then you need to think of this as a high-risk investment. If property prices come crashing down, which is not impossible with impending tax increase, interest rate rises, energy price hikes, etc., then you're going to suffer. Buy-to-let property investment is always going to make up an important part of the investment landscape in the UK. Now, in terms of whether you should consider a new investment, hold the one you've already got, or take profits while markets are buoyant, the answer is, of course, to take independent advice, put yourself in an informed position, specifically consider the tax implications, and plan ahead.